The elevator arrived from the tunnels, but rather than the city, our hero found himself in the sewers. Hey everyone, Lieutenant Dan here. This is episode 2 of our Blue Fire playthrough, and we're jumping right in. There was a door right next to the elevator, but I didn't think I could reach it, so I followed the pipes instead. I found a ladder, which I slid down like a fireman, and then I narrowly dodged this sneak attack. I found the lever that lowered the gate, but it didn't matter because that way was inaccessible to me at this point. So I headed back up the ladder, and up another ladder, and then had to carefully balance on these pipes. After some more strategic maneuvering, I found another lever, this one opening up a nearby door. I made it to the upper level and reached the door, and with that I had finally arrived in Stoneheart City. This is where the spirit Nuos had told me to come and defeat the shadow threatening the forest shrine. But of course, first I wanted to explore. Turns out there were people living in the city, like this guy named Ari the Crafter, who would sell me different colored cloaks. I ended up buying the gray dye option because I only had enough ore for one, and I thought that would be a safe choice. But to my surprise, I guess technically that is a shade of gray. It was fine for now. I activated the fire shrine in the middle of town, and I found Orup in another house, and he gave me an odd rock, as if that makes a square after he grossly overcharged me on the elevator fix. And then I met this little guy, Wolfgang, who apparently was practicing the flute, and he confirmed that the temple in front of us was Nuos' shrine. But I still wanted to explore. I found a suspicious corridor with a spiral staircase at the end, at the top of which was an NPC named Mork, a librarian/merchant whose shop was way out of my price range. But turns out I could sell him stuff too, and he gave me a side quest to find 5 book sets for him. Coincidentally, I found the first one right outside his shop. I found another door and opened it with a lever, and this turned out to be the other door I had seen when I first got off the elevator in the sewers. For a city designed for people, this place was surprisingly difficult to navigate. But after some creative platforming, I found another lever. This one opened the door to the temple, which I hadn't even noticed was locked, so that worked out. I rested and saved at the shrine, and learned that the red orbs are shadow fragments, which I can spend to increase my mana. I found another house, but the only person home was a little kid who was looking for his mom, so that became another side quest. I found a second and a third set of books, and a door to Abandoned Path, which I did investigate, but I couldn't enter without the graveyard key, which told me it was time to take the plunge and enter the temple. The forest shrine, filled with pots for me to break, and, mysterious puzzles and challenges to solve, probably a bunch of enemies to defeat, and one gray wearing warrior who had come to free the god of wisdom, Nuos. Speak of the devil, God. There he is! Nuos told me to find his claws hidden within the shrine and destroy the shadow before it destroyed him. Sounded like a plan, so I got to work and discovered a new enemy. Ow! A horned skull propeller cap looking thing with a shockwave attack. They took a few hits, but they weren't too difficult. And I found a switch which would let me change the water level, which seemed to open up a lot more of the temple. So I headed down and fought some more propeller caps. Or tried to. I wasn't used to fighting flying enemies. I got an old key and a ruby ore, and then remembered I had a ranged attack, which was useful. There was a super skull in the next room, and I quickly ran out of mana for ranged attacks. This was going to be tricky because I had to dodge the shockwave, not fall in the water, and hit him in the air. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. One path was blocked, and the other had a pair of skull swordsmen for me to take care of. Not the cleanest fight, but I was starting to understand the advantage of aerial attacks in this game. There wasn't anything else in this room, so I figured I needed to backtrack. Sure enough, back in the first room there was a sneaky drop down to the room below, behind the gate, and a switch that lowered the gate so I could get back to the other area. Besides a lot of jars for me to break, I also found a locked door that opened with the old key I found. And the room behind had more doors that I probably had to do in succession. The first room seemed empty, But big shock, the door closed behind me and enemies appeared out of the shadow. It's a trap! No worries, I could take these guys, as long as I didn't get cornered. The sword guy went down easy, and I was trying to be smart about the skullcopter, backing out after hits. An easy win, and a reward. And as expected, the reward was an old key, which I used to unlock the next door. And another seemingly empty room. But wait! The door closed behind me, and more enemies appeared out of the shadowy fog. But they were no match for the gray knight dressed suspiciously in white. Ooh, that felt good. And then I must have gotten cocky because I started taking hits. But in the end, I prevailed, and a special glowing chest appeared, inside of which was a holy key to unlock a special door. Perhaps door number 3? Yep, it needed a holy key, and I figured there would be another fight in this room, but instead it was just a chest. And inside the chest was the gauntlets, or claws, Nuos had told me to find, that allowed me to wall run and jump, which was cool. It's like my superpowers are expanding, or force powers. Maybe I really am a Jedi, jumping around like Yoda. Anyway, now I knew I needed to backtrack and figure out where I could go now that I couldn't go before. First was this dead-end room where I fought the swordsman, but now I could wall jump. Although these pillars were pretty far apart, this was not going to be as easy as I thought. I was getting pretty close, but the stamina was getting me. Then I realized if I could go to the other side, that was much easier, and the lever lowered the gate all the way at the top. And just like that, I had hunted my first spirit, the Forest Guardian. I would have to go to a fire shrine to use that though. But I could now see where my wall running would get me across this gap, even if I missed it the first time. I would like to say that I always learn from my failures and never make the same mistake twice, so I will. And anything you see to the contrary is obviously the game's fault, not mine. Oh hey, I lowered the water even more. But I did learn that I can completely negate fall damage by doing one of these right before landing. The next room had a swordsman, who I quickly dispatched, and a void course called Arago's Challenge. It was only a 1-star, so I jumped in. This dungeon had been basically all combat, so an obstacle course was a nice break. And yes, it was an easy level and should be an easy one-shot. Though now that I had the ability to grab walls, this course included new challenges that made me practice those skills. So that was cool. This was also the first time I found a void ore, and I still don't know how valuable that is. And then I missed the jump. I tried to recover, but it wasn't working, and eventually I fell. So much for one-shotting the level. And then it happened again. I changed my approach, and it happened again. How was I missing this so many times? For real. Then I gave it a good running jump and made it. Still not exactly sure what was different about that, but I made it. Unfortunately, the next section was on the break-apart cubes, and yeah, I was pretty upset about that. Least of all because now I had to redo that jump, and I missed it. But then I did another running jump and just barely made it. I did not expect to fall 6 times in a 1-star void course, but that's the way this cookie crumbled, and I was just happy to be done. And with that, I got my 9th heart and headed back to the forest shrine. I found another super skull, and I had to wall run to get to him, but I nailed that first try. The next room was big and elaborate, and had a swordsman for me to fight. I'm telling you, I am getting better. It also had a ton of jars for me to break. I just didn't realize I was already at capacity. And another swordsman wanted to get his butt kicked, although he did get a hit in. The punk. And then I found a new pair of swords. I didn't like their look as much, but they did notably more damage. The exit door needed a holy key, which was hiding somewhere in the room. A pair of pillars allowed me to wall jump to the 2nd level and reach a lever, which opened a gate, but started a timer as well. It seemed I had to platform around the edge of the room to reach the door, and also there was an enemy in the way that ruined my run. So I decided to take him out. And that's when I discovered just how far I could dash while targeting an enemy. but I had lost too much time on that guy, so I had to reset the lever and try again. By the way, to reset the timer, you first had to hit the lever to close the door, then hit it again to open it. And I'm not gonna lie, I struggled with this challenge. I would fall and then run back, hit the lever twice, and then when the pressure was on, I would fall again and have to reset the timer again. This part in particular just kept getting me. And low-key, it's embarrassing to rewatch how much I failed here. At one point, I took a pause to try to kill this other flying skull, and that's when this happened. Yeah, I could use the targeted dash to vault myself up and bypass most of the platforming. This was pure cheese, but then the timer ran out. So I hit the lever one more time and decided to give it one more honest attempt, to not use the cheese unless I couldn't pull this off. And I couldn't pull it off. I don't even think I was going the right way. So magic elevator it was. Still had to clutch out the last bit, and I actually almost blew it, but I made it at last. More flying enemies, more wall running across puddles, more trying to figure out aerial combat and how to do it safely, and failing. And one more lever to hit to open one last gate, and then once more embarrass myself with a really dumb fall. I don't always use fire essence, but when I do, it's because I've been absolutely destroyed by entirely preventable injury. At the end of the room, there was one more enemy, a bunch more ore that I was actually too full to collect, an emote statue which I paid to teach me how to wave, hello, and an emote plaque with an emote I actually knew how to do for a change, and now I know the emote plaque makes a mystery chest appear at a corresponding blank plaque. And last but not least, a chest containing an old key. But wait a minute, I needed a holy key, not an old key. Well, I forgot the tree had a locked gate that needed an old key, and the glowing chest inside contained the holy key. So then I did one more force jump and killed my free elevator ride, and used the holy key to open the last door. After fighting, platforming, puzzle solving, and even cheesing my way through this temple, I was finally here. The boss fight. The most Souls-like moment I had experienced yet. Me versus this thorny plant named Gruh. Weird name. But I had no interest in letting this weed stain my white, gray robes. His primary attack was rhythmic shockwaves, which, try as I might, I somehow never got the hang of. And when I did get close, he had some kind of monster cry that would push me away, back into the range of his shockwaves. So even if I could tank the damage, I couldn't get more than a couple hits in at a time. When his health hit halfway, he burrowed into the ground, and a couple minions appeared. They were basically repeats of the propeller cap skulls, so they weren't much trouble. And when I had cleared them, Gruh appeared again to continue the fight, with his stupid shockwaves. I got some good hits in, proved I'm white by my inability to jump, and then once Gruh's health fell below 25%, he burrowed again. A couple more floating enemies to take out with some bobbing and weaving. And it was time to finish the fight with Gruh. Would I finally be able to completely dodge a full volley of shockwaves? No, I would not. But in the end, I cut down that weed like I was a bottle of Roundup, and he was donezo. Bye-bye, Gruh. And now there was just one more room, and one more cutscene. Nuos showed up, and this time I mean he actually showed up, not as a little glowing dot, but as his full, form, I guess. Cool design, but very alien looking. He introduced himself, even though we had already talked, and he once again made it clear I was the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. He didn't actually thank me for rescuing him, though it was acknowledged. And then he gave me directions to the temple of the next god spirit who was probably also being threatened by the shadow. He gave me the key to the water temple where I would find said spirit god, his friend Uthas, and then without even asking me how I was doing, he said bye and disappeared into a cloud of sparkles. So rude. Then I got teleported back to the entrance of the shrine, and now I had the Uthas temple key and a new mission in the main quest. And thus concludes the tale of how the very, very light gray warrior freed the forest shrine.